Welcome to Nick Snacks, and today I'm going to show you how to put together a quick and easy breakfast without any need of using an oven, because last time that happened, Butterfingers. But that's okay. When do you actually have time to have a big hearty breakfast anyway? If you're anything like me, no matter when you're starting your day, you're probably already running late for it. Thankfully, I was taught in an early age of the shortcut known as cereal. Problem is, most of it's gonna kill you. But that is where Magic Spoon comes in. Each box packs 13 to 14 grams of protein and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, and only 140 calories per serving. It has 0 grams of sugar, it's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free. Regardless of your dietary restrictions, you can still enjoy a bowl of cereal. Wow! No fire! For real, for any peanut butter lovers out there, you need to try the peanut butter flavor. It is fantastic. They've got a ton of flavors outside of your fruity and your peanut butter and your cocoa. You also have maple waffle, you got blueberry, you've got cookies and cream, cinnamon, it's a whole bunch of stuff. And if you don't like this for any reason, you get your money back, no questions asked. And they're also shipping to the UK and Canada, so what are you waiting for? Now, if all that sounds good to you, you can put together your own variety box over on their website and use the offer code Apologist to get $5 off your order, or just go to magicspoon.com/apologist. Either way works fine. Wow, cooking's sure easy when you don't have to do it. Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video, and let's get on with it. I can't truly recall what my first video game experience was, but whatever it may have been, I've always had standout favorites. And they were largely the same as other kids of my age. Mario, and then soon after, Sonic. And from there I'd experienced so many more, but like many others, the Plumber and Hedgehog helped me guide my interest towards the classic platformer. And even when Sega fumbled their way into 3D while Nintendo was fashionably late, which left the market open to be dominated by the brand new Sony PlayStation, I remained loyal to the two companies that helped me shape my love of this hobby. Surely a Sony machine would fall to the wayside, same as the likes of so many others that were dumb enough to go against the two reigning champions, but it became harder and harder to deny not only the success of the PlayStation, but its appeal as well. My uncle had one, and he was nice enough to let me enjoy the thrills of Twisted Metal, or get freaked out by the likes of Space Griffin. Even as a stubborn, stupid kid, I had to admit that there were a lot of cool new experiences on this machine you just couldn't find anywhere else. Regardless, I decided to choose the Saturn, and then a couple years later, thankfully, I also got a Nintendo 64. And truth be told, both of them have some brilliant titles, but then my uncle got this demo disc for his PlayStation, and he showed me this one game that completely changed my mind about this weird console. It started with this somber opening cutscene, laying it on thick with this sad piano and vague rambling about dreams. What is this, a square RPG? Well, no, as you can see as it carries on, there's a lot of vibrant colors and stylized designs. Something you'd think would be made by the likes of Sega, or hell, maybe even Nintendo, but no, this was indeed a Sony exclusive. But considering a lot of the art direction and the talk of dreams, who could blame me for thinking that this was something akin to Kirby or Nights into Dreams? And then a curious creature pops onto the screen. What is this? A cat? A rabbit? Both? Neither? Well, it's none of those. What you have here is the GOAT. This is Klonoa, and as far as I'm concerned, his game is one of the greatest ever created. This game stood out to me, which was impressive because in the late 90s there were certainly a lot of games vying for my attention. For everybody's attention, console games had moved into the third dimension, with some of its pioneers laying the groundwork of what the industry would be and continues to be to this very day. But ironically, this particular game I'm talking about stood out to me because of what it managed to accomplish in a space left behind with the previous generation of consoles. Something I was already dearly missing, the aforementioned side-scroller. Klonoa, quite tragically, was not a well-known game around the time it was released, at least outside of Japan, which always bummed me out. This game was the very reason I caved and finally picked up a PS1 after growing up as a Sega and Nintendo kid. Well, I say picked up, but I actually mean as I got this console as a birthday or Christmas present, whichever one it was. Thanks, Mom. But ironically, it's probably because I grew up loving these great platforming games from Sony's very competition that made me love Klonoa. I probably don't need to point out those comparisons. You can find Mario elements in literally any platformer, and Sonic brought in a now exhausted wave of animal imitators. But watching this gameplay, you'll also find elements of Yoshi's Island, Rise Star, Kirby, Knights, all with that cinematic presentation that Square was already making the platform famous for. And I should mention this now because even if the game was at one point unpopular, it certainly found a cult following, and if you've spent any time on retro gaming channels on YouTube, you've probably at least heard of this game, and its reputation of it being pretty damn good. But if you're coming into this game expecting some mind-blowing mechanics that have never been seen before or replicated since, well, hate to break it to you, but you're not gonna find that here. In fact, that's the secret sauce of this game. It's not doing anything new. It took the side-scrolling genre, gave it a spit shine, and told the world that it can still produce something truly special. Like almost every other platformer, you move from point A and you try to get to point B, you jump on platforms. If you need an extra boost, holding down the jump button gives you a flutter for a few moments. You can collect some gems, 100 of which will give you an extra life. You defeat enemies, and you do that by turning them into balloons. Furries, inflation, and even feet pics. What more could you want from a game? Yeah, that balloon power is how you're going to be solving most of your problems in this journey. You shoot with your ring towards an enemy, which itself is your first bit of risk versus reward gameplay, as your wind bullet doesn't have much range, meaning you have to get up close and personal with any minions you come across. But once you do, you can use them as a projectile, be it to destroy other enemies, activate switches, or open eggs for a collectible, or you can Yoshi them and grant yourself a double jump to higher ledges, or across caverns, or to attack an enemy below. It's a very simple idea, but trust me when I tell you that they make great use of all the variations and combinations of this one gimmick. And if you are familiar with the likes of Kirby, Yoshi, Mario 2, Rise Star, it's not going to take you long to wrap your head around this. Unless you're brand new to the genre or you have very little experience with it, you're not going to have too much trouble making your way through this adventure. And even then, it's not that challenging of a game. At least not for the first half. The difficulty ramps up at a fair and steady pace, slowly incorporating more platforming and puzzle challenges. Now, in terms of puzzles, they sprinkle that stuff in here and there for optional challenges early on, but by the end of the game, they will just stick you into puzzle rooms and you won't be able to get through until you figure it out. Alongside far more demanding platforming challenges, expecting you to make the most out of your inflation abilities. A lot of the endgame challenges mix both the puzzle and platforming in equal measure, demanding your mind works as quick as your fingers. This game could potentially be a headache for some newcomers. I have heard some complaints from friends who have never touched this before, and while I'm sure there's merit to those critiques, by and large this is a carefully crafted experience. Even when it's lighter on the puzzles earlier on, there are subtle little things this game is teaching you. Just as a quick example, envision 2-1. As you enter the cave behind the waterfall, there's a little alcove to the right with a constantly respawning enemy. This is here to teach you to pay attention to the slanted walls, as inflated enemies can squeeze through tighter hallways as long as they're slant to the entrance. But if you're expecting an enemy to just clip on through a normal size hallway without that slant, you're gonna be out of luck. They do this earlier on with situations that don't really require you to go out of your way for, but if you're trying to unlock the extra vision at the end of the game, you're going to need to pay attention, especially since you're going to run into challenges that require you to pay attention to how fast Klonoa is dropping and where he catches an enemy mid-air, and more things of that nature that I don't want to spoil for you, as a large part of this is figuring this out for yourself. So all I'll say is, the dupuridu is in the details. You don't level up or unlock new moves or anything like that. You only ever have this one gimmick and the same arsenal of abilities to master, and the levels slowly dish out new enemy types and obstacles that force you to take advantage of all of it. And as any good end stage boss would do, they act as a test for the skills you've been practicing leading up to the encounter. It's a tightly crafted, balanced experience. None of the levels are very long, and they offer extra challenges if one is so inclined. You can just barrel through and have a good time, but if you want to push yourself even further, you can rescue trapped citizens, 6 in each level. And for the extra ambitious, you can go for a complete 150 Dreamstone collection in each stage. But honestly, I would not recommend that for your very first time playing through this game. Some of these are a total pain to grab, and you also have to keep the Mirror Fairy in consideration, as that doubles the value of Dreamstones for a short period, and yes, that does matter for a complete 150 count. The fairies are placed next to a specific set of stones to collect, and grabbing them all within a short time limit is is a puzzle within itself. So again, I would really only bother if you've honed your skills and you want something more to do once you complete the game. I feel like I'm playing up the difficulty more than I should. It really isn't that bad, and thankfully it's not too old school in its design. Klonoa doesn't shun all the exciting new things that came in with the 5th generation of consoles. You can still save on a memory card, so a game over just kicks you out of the level, and once again, they're not that long, so not that big of a deal. And outside of gameplay, it takes advantage of what the PlayStation could do. It has beautiful cutscenes, voice acting, and oh so many of those hip new polygons that help create this 2.5D world. But again, this was nothing new, even by late 1997. All of this stuff was just kinda standard. Even that 2.5D gimmick had been done before by the likes of Pandemonium. Hell, they've been ballooning enemies since Namco's very own Dig Dug. But even with all that said, this game still manages to stand out, and that's all helped by this adorable little whatever he is. I did joke earlier about what the hell he was supposed to be, but that was actually an intentional choice by his designer, giving him elements of a cat, rabbit, and dog, but without ever firmly landing on any one species. A theme I feel kinda plays through the entire title. A lot of familiar elements coming together to create something unique. But yeah, outside of not even being sure of what he's supposed to be, I'm not sure what he's going for fashion-wise. Look, I love Klonoa's design. He's one of my favorite characters ever. He's iconic and easy to recognize, but what is happening here? This looks like the very first time he's ever dressed himself. He's got a giant collar and some dish gloves, must be a Clem's fan, and a Pac-Man hat. Poor boy can't even get his own logo. He also has a giant wedding ring. Unlike Sonic, who uses his jewelry as collectibles and a health system, Klonoa instead uses his ring to inflate his enemies with, marriage proposals? I don't know. No, silly me, the ring is actually powered by a wind spirit that lives within the Chaos Emerald, granting Klonoa the ability to turn his enemies into a kink I have never understood and quite frankly don't want to. Oh, and that wind spirit in question? That's Hupo, this teal ball thing. This is Klonoa's best friend, and you're technically playing both of these characters through your adventure. There's not a lot to Hupo's design. Honestly, you could introduce him as a Kirby character, and most people would probably believe you. He's got a squeaky little voice. I've never found it irritating myself, but I could understand if anybody else had this dude get under their skin. Regardless, if you get through this opening cutscene without falling in love with at least Klonoa, then you might be an actual sociopath. The CG here, as you'd expect, has aged, but even over 25 years later, I do believe this holds up surprisingly well, largely thanks to the attention to detail and only using these cutscenes to really emphasize key points of the story. Just look at everything happening here. There are so many little elements that really help this pop. That little whoosh of air when the ring crashes into the ground, and just the voice acting and direction here. It sounds like he's actually bent over the ring, quietly talking to himself. And then sounds like he's actually struggling to pull it free. And then when he does, the volume of his voice actually fades, making you feel like he is actually launching backwards. I know that's a weird thing to focus on, but even today, so many bits of animation just sound like somebody standing in front of a microphone. They go out of their way to make you feel like you're in the woods with Klonoa. And all this is happening while he's speaking a completely made-up language, but you don't actually need to understand anything he's saying here. You still know what's going on. They do thankfully give you subtitles when dialogue is a bit more important during the adventure, but for this short little intro, it establishes this adventurous little dude and his new friendship with this glowing orb, and then later on, the looming threat of an unknown force. CG cutscenes were a really big deal for games back in the day. The mega popular Final Fantasy VII's marketing hinged entirely on the cinematic power provided by them. We were not yet at the point where a CG trailer would annoy the hell out of us because it wasn't actually showing us any gameplay. Here in the late 90s, this was still a special treat, because even if actual gameplay didn't look exactly like this, it showed us where games were going, and they were on a path to rival the spectacle and storytelling potential of other media, and Klonoa was no exception. This isn't here to trick you into playing an uglier game. There's narrative importance to this CG, and there at least is a bit of consistency here, as they do use this CG model of Klonoa for the in-game sprites, and they do get quite expressive, even if they are quite crunchy at times. Again, I know how arbitrary this might seem, scene, but I cannot stress enough how important these scenes are for the overall story, which we are not going to spoil here, but just to give you a quick synopsis, the adventure kicks off with a strange crashed something up on Bell Hill, which catches the attention of Klonoa and Hupo, who set off to investigate, and what they discover at the top sets them off on a journey through all the kingdoms of Phantomile in an attempt to stop the evil Gaudius and his henchman Joka from unleashing nightmares across the land. And most of the nightmares look like this. Real scary stuff. But yeah, that's all I'm going to tell you about the story. There's a lot I want to pick apart in terms of unique characters and lore and themes and all this other stuff, but we're going to save that for a separate project. For now, that's all you get. And if that sounds fairly generic, well, I can't blame you. A lot of the game is going to feel like that. This is a lighthearted romp meeting interesting characters in interesting places. But keep in mind, the game's director wanted to inject some proper storytelling and world building into a genre he didn't often find these things. Again, there's a reason I got so detailed on the CG cutscenes. There's more depth to this world and its inhabitants than you might first realize. But before you know it, you'll be cheering on this weird little cat dude, having your heart melt at this weird baby fish, and laughing at the amazing energy given off by Joka. Hands down one of the best henchmen in any piece of media. I just love how hysterical his voice actor gets. And honestly, most of this cast is giving it their all. You have cute characters, you have funny characters, you have downright terrifying ones, and this is all with fake languages. Yet they still manage to convey the proper emotions with whatever is happening. Klonoa has catchphrases that range between Wahoo to Dupuridu, and I know what they all mean. And it turns out Wahoo can mean anything between no or Wahoo. Every character seems to have their own unique vernacular, yet they all seem to understand each other just fine. And as you can imagine, smaller roles means a less robust vocabulary. You could probably trick someone into thinking that Klonoa talk is from a country you've never heard of. But others, well, they just sound like they came out of a Banjo-Kazooie game. But even if the likes of Pamela get little more than a shrill screech, she at least makes up for it with harp noises whenever she flies, so that's pretty cool. I've never once questioned how silly all of this actually is until I started detailing this for you, so I hope you appreciate it. And it doesn't stop at these charming characters, because man, do I love these environments. I thought all these locales were stunning as a kid, and I still think they're quite pretty today. Old 3D games are usually considered quite ugly by today's standards, but I do feel that the low poly look is getting a revival. But even with that considered, I feel like Klonoa has always had a somewhat unique look to it. And even if it's showing its age a little more these days, these crunchy sprites still work surprisingly well with these polygonal environments, which are all wonderfully varied, colorful, and just a pleasure to look at even all these years later. And of course, the level layouts work beautifully with Klonoa's mechanics, becoming more complex as the game carries on, teasing you at first with paths to extra gems, lives, health, or captive Phantomilians, but eventually these optional paths lead to far more complicated routes that weave back into themselves as you sort out more complicated puzzles and platforming challenges. All of this accompanied by a fantastic soundtrack, one that apparently had 11 different composers working on it. I was not aware of that until I picked up the vinyl for this game last year. I was always under the impression this was just done by one guy, but no, there's a whole lot of talent here. Each kingdom has a unique sound, but there's a cohesive theme keeping it all together. If those are the correct terms, I don't know music jargon. Point is, it sounds real good, and it all sounds like Klonoa, which apparently sounds like a Peruvian flute band. I should probably stop talking about music, as apparently all I seem to know about it is what I learned from South Park jokes.
I'm so sick of hearing this music everywhere I go. I think Kenny likes it.
But before I do that, I do have to point out this one beautiful boss theme, Palladium's Drive, if that's how it's pronounced, I don't know. Fun little story about that. I looked up that track on YouTube while I was in the mood to hear it a few months ago. It's my favorite of the entire soundtrack. So I clicked on a random upload on a fan's channel, and in the comments was this song's very own composer, Kota Takahashi, thanking the uploader for sharing his music. Look at that, a creator happy to see people just enjoying his creation. What a concept. I'm going to leave a link to his YouTube channel in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out. He not only has this theme, but a new one inspired by this theme, as well as plenty of other music. He's a super talented dude. Look, we can get into much greater detail about any of these elements in this game, and for some of them, we certainly will in different videos. For now, I'm just trying to give you a general overview of why I love this game so much without giving away too much. But if you're still on the fence on whether or not you want to try this out, then I recommend you just take a look at the first few moments of the first level. If you're vibing with that, then you're probably going to love this game, and I highly, highly recommend that you play it. Please play it. This is a short little adventure that rocks the living hell out of everything it sets out to do. Gameplay, art direction, characters, story, world building, presentation, soundtrack. No matter what category you want to pick apart, this game feels like it was made with love and effort, and I think that's what shines through and why it resonates with its fans so strongly. And yeah, if you have heard of this game before, then you have probably heard about how strongly the fan base loves it. But despite the cult of Klonoa and the solid sales this game made in Japan back in '97, this series never really caught on with the mainstream audience, even though this little dude tried so hard to stick around, and we tried so hard to keep him here with us. Unfortunately, not all of this was seen as charm, as a lot of reviews of the day said that this game was too cute. Imagine that being a genuine critique for any video game in this day and age. Just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I could mock it, but the sales in the Western markets speak for themselves. They weren't wrong. People were not buying a PlayStation for more cutesy platformers. And that obviously is a damn shame, because there's so much more here than a smiling cat with long ears. But even though the original game fell into obscurity, it's never stopped Namco from trying to bring it back. And that leads us to the Namm Collection. No, that's not a collection of Vietnam War movies, that's a collection of Namco games that came out for the PS1 on the PS2. I did go out of my way to import this sucker, and, well, honestly, there's not a lot to report. This is just a port of the PS1 game, and it runs just fine. There are some fun little extras. I like this opening to the collection that mashes up Klonoa's windmill theme with the other Namco titles. There's also a lovely little museum that gives you a look at a lot of lovely art, and that probably wasn't readily available at the time of this original release. Honestly, I just love having it in my collection, and it's nice to see Door to Phantomile in a collection with other Namco classics of the day. Tekken, Mr. Driller, Ace Combat, and
Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
it really did deserve to stand among these other greats. And while sales didn't reflect that, I'm glad at least Namco of the day acknowledged its masterpiece status. The original game was also ported to the PS3, Vita, and PSP, and if it's still available on the 3 and Vita at the time of you watching this video, and you have one of those machines and you haven't downloaded it yet, then what are you doing? Go get it! And now that Sony is rolling out original PlayStation games on their new PS Plus service, I really hope this shows up on it. I'd love to see this game with some trophies. But believe it or not, there is still one more port we have to talk about before we move on to the remake. This is Klonoa, Door to Phantomile for mobile phones. Released only in Japan and sadly never dumped online. All we have to work off of are these two gameplay videos and all the information compiled by the fine folks of the Lost Media Wiki. This was dropped back in 2008 on the iApply service for Docomo phones right before the Wii game's release. It'd later get thrown onto other apps for other phones, with one actually having a demo of the game pre-installed. It sounds like it was available on multiple devices for many years, but unfortunately, like I already said, we simply don't have this available anywhere online, so we can't emulate it, which is a shame because I'm a sucker for demakes and I would love to see how well something as precise as Klonoa would run on a mobile device. Java games were never known to be any good, but despite that, I think this looks pretty solid. Even the MIDI versions of the music sound good as well, but as impressed as I am, even without playing this, probably safe to assume that this would have been the worst way to experience the game, even compared to the Wii remake. I'm only kidding, the game is perfectly fine. It's just a bit infamous for hardcore fans. And why is that? Wow, who the fuck are you? Yeah, they dubbed over the darling Phantomile language with English and turned Klonoa and Hupo into Sonic and Tails.
I'm Klonoa from Wind Village.
And I'm Hupo.
At least they replaced Pamela's voice with,
King Seedoff and the chiefess of Forlock Forest told me everything that happened. Come, get up on my back.
Oh, wow. There's, something about that fish, you know what I mean?
Come on my back.
Truth be told, most of this voice cast consisted of seasoned professionals, but when you make Klonoa sound like Sonic with a smoking habit, probably not the best move. And apparently the dev team thought so as well, as they also re-recorded all the Phantomile voices, which for the most part sound great. I don't dig all of the voices. Joka sounds a bit too anime villain for my liking. Oh, sorry, I meant to say Joker. Yeah, they renamed him to Choker, and I have no idea why. Pretty sure that name is largely associated with another character. I know his original name's not all that different, but it was still something that made him unique. He's the Joka, baby. Stole that joke from Boten. Sorry, dude, that was too good of a reference. I also hate his weird little stick arms. I think this was done to fall in line with the aesthetic of the Klonoa manga, and honestly, it looks just fine in that art style. But here it just feels weird. I like the Rayman look of the original, and while I find Klonoa's new look much less offensive, I still prefer the original. And as my buddy Channel Pup pointed out about this design, it looks a little bit too much like Sora. But then again, turnabout is fair play, and this certainly beats out whatever the hell they were going for with this redesign. I thought it was ballsy to even release this look to the public, but it really goes to show how far they were willing to go to rebrand Klonoa into something more appealing for a Western audience. And hey, removed from Klonoa, I think this looks pretty good. Not that I want this to replace my floppy-eared son, but if they'd use this as like a completely separate character, I think this would have worked just fine. And hey, if you're not digging this new drip, you can unlock more outfits once you beat the extra vision at the end of the game, including the original giant collar design from the first game and the blue getup from Klonoa 2. So yes, while there are a few changes here, most of them are reversible. Not without some casualties, but for the most part it's just fine. The largest and most egregious change, for me at any rate, was replacing all of the beautiful CG cutscenes for something from in-engine, which is just nowhere near as expressive. See, there was a reason why I wouldn't shut up about them earlier. They get the point across, and bless their hearts, they do their damnedest to replicate the originals. And I suppose it makes things a little bit more consistent visually, but just trust me, if you've not seen the original game, you're missing out on some pivotal little details, which we'll get into in a spoiler video. Now, if all of this sounds like needless nitpicking, you're not wrong. People do get up in arms about these details, and trust me, I get it. I much prefer the original as well, but make no mistake, this is still a damn good game. The dialogue and the story remains largely the same, and most importantly, the gameplay is still as fantastic as ever. We do have a couple of noticeable changes from the original. Klonoa no longer slides if you hit the ground at full speed, which could be a potential issue in the original game. His wind bullet extends out a little farther. They've modified a couple challenges here and there, some enemy movement speed, stuff like that. One of the most notable things I can think of off the top of my head is removing the gap in the second boss's arena. I'm sure I could give you a far more detailed list of examples, but I feel like the fact that more things weren't popping out to me immediately is all you really need to know. If you're familiar with the original game, nothing here is going to throw you off. The gameplay in both is rock solid, and it might even be a little bit tighter here. The colors of the Wii game are a little muted, and some of the character models are questionable, and both me and my buddy Wayne agree that we miss the little walkway sparkles, but when aesthetic preferences are my biggest complaint, you really don't have a lot to stress over. And even with the improved visuals, you can tell that they didn't give the same budget to the Wii version as they did the original. This looks perfectly fine for a Wii game, and the original was very technically impressive for a late 97 PlayStation 1 game. But that said, the Wii is still more powerful than the PS1, so that means fully 3D models on 3D environments, which obviously renders a lot lot more of the background, alluding to forthcoming challenges much better than the original ever could, and they do give you some more fun unlockables. Outside of that wardrobe I mentioned earlier, there's also a character gallery, a movie gallery, a reverse mode, and a time attack, which, yeah, nothing special, but it's nice to see. Just some fun extras for you to unlock. Oh, and it also came with a nice full color manual. The original didn't even have color in their manual. Shouldn't really sway a purchase choice either way, as none of that would matter if the gameplay wasn't solid, but thankfully, it is. Well, except for this weird wind attack that stuns enemies. I don't know why they added that. I literally forgot it was here. It was important for the core gameplay to remain intact, if not slightly improved, because as the challenge carries on through the game, it demands a lot more of the player, especially the extra stage that you can unlock. That was put there to let you know that they could have gotten far more sinister with the mechanics on display. And it just goes to show that they really didn't need to do a whole lot to the core gameplay to truly make this shine. And this was released on the most popular system of the generation, while it was still riding off the popularity of retro throwbacks. Yeah, Klonoa bombed even worse than the original. Yeah, I have my nitpicks with the Wii release, but I was so unbelievably happy just to see this game again. And I was hoping beyond hope that this time it would stick, but it just didn't. And unfortunately, that would be it for this series. A webcomic here, rumors of a movie there, but at the end of the day, that was all that was left for Klonoa. But 14 long years later, on a fateful day in February of 2022.
Oh my god.
Oh! Oh! Whoa! Holy crap! Holy crap! Whoa! Oh my god! Everyone shut the fuck up!
It just goes to show you how unbelievably desperate the Klonoa fanbase is when we are freaking out at the chance to play the same game a third time over. Seeing Klonoa again is not just excitement to play the same thing over and over again. For us, it's a chance to get this series off the ground and make it a viable franchise, or at the very least, finally land ourselves the fabled Klonoa 3. And I swear to God, if we get a Klonoa 3 before we get a Half-Life 3. But before we get into the game itself, I do need to mention the baffling marketing behind this one. I have no idea what Bandai Namco were thinking. You could not find this game anywhere for pre-order here in the States. And no, I'm not talking about physical releases, because we did not get a physical release here in the States, even though that happened in the other major markets on all the current consoles. No, even putting that aside, I'm talking about digital releases. You could not pre-install this game. You couldn't pre-buy the game. We didn't even get a demo of this game until right around release, even though other countries had one like a month in advance. I mean, there was a Steam page, but again, you couldn't do anything until they actually had the digital release ready to go. And once it did, they had this thing available for $40, but if you wanted to spend an extra $20, then you could get like 4 costumes and a digital soundtrack and some art. $20? Are you guys insane? That's not even all of the available costumes. Oh, and Namco had a Steam sale going on during the release, but you did not see hide nor hair of Klonoa in it whatsoever. There were no ads for it on Namco's homepage. There were no reviews out on any of the major websites. You just actively had to seek out this game on release. It was absolutely ridiculous. And usually, when there's zero marketing like this, it's a warning sign that the game is bad or unfinished or something's wrong with it, and the publisher is well aware and they just want to sneak it out and get as many sales without spending too much money on advertising and crap like that. But no, this is not a Sega game. Klonoa Fantasy Reverie is a super solid collection. That said though, I do need to stress that it isn't a top to bottom remake like the Wii version. This actually is the Wii version. But unlike Klonoa Hearts here, you can see this version of Klonoa harkens back to that original adorable PS1 design. And they no longer have the English voice track. I'm sure some of you are nostalgic for that, and I'm very sorry for your loss, but no, I'm not. I'm just trying to be polite. Wow, who cares? That said, they didn't even bother to bring in the re-recorded Phantomile voices from the Wii game. They just straight up used the original PlayStation recordings, which are my personal preference, but I will admit it sounds incredibly muffled when compared to the updated designs or other voice samples in this game. For some reason, they mix in new recordings from Klonoa's original voice actor, and it is noticeable, especially for for one specific spot in a cutscene, which, again, I'm not going to spoil here, but I would bet money that even newbies who have never touched this series before are going to notice it. It's that jarring. But even with all that said, the moment Klonoa stepped out of his grandpa's house to start his adventure... Oh, my sweet boy is back. Oh, you floppy-eared bundle of nonsense words. Don't ever leave me again. He really is adorable, but yeah, I'm gonna be a weirdo and nitpick. I think his new nose is a little too big. It looks fine, I just prefer the original design. Something a little more noticeable is the fact that since this is built off the bones of the Wii game, and therefore built for that version of the character, this newer, shorter design clips through his own clothes. Again, these are all nitpicks. I love seeing these old designs. It tells me that they're embracing the legacy of this series, taking pride in what they've done without chasing the trends of other more popular franchises. Still, I would not have mind seeing the Wii costume as an unlockable. It is still in the code after all. But again, I'm happy with what we have. The updated models are probably the most prominent of the changes here. I'm sure they did some texture work here and there, and obviously the colors are far more vibrant than they ever were in the Wii version. Outside of that, the gameplay itself is pretty much the same. They haven't changed a whole lot. Well, let's just get that out of the way. Still feels great, and it's still, sorry, let's just get that moved out of the way. Anyway, like I was saying, everything else is just about the— oh, come on! Okay, so maybe they added some obnoxious instruction screens that weren't there before. They did have some instructions in the Wii version, but they were optional signs that you could just look at. Here they stopped the game dead in its tracks, which is just a bit obnoxious. I thought the original game did a good enough job teaching the player as you went. It is a puzzle platformer after all. You're expected to use your brain. But that nitpick aside, you can turn this off in the menu, so really is a non-issue. I just wanted to make a joke. Everything else is, yeah, pretty much the same. Like I said about the Wii version, they didn't have to do a whole lot to the core gameplay mechanics. They were fantastic in the late 90s, and they're fantastic now. It's timeless. Still, with that said, they have tweaked a couple of things here. If you're playing on normal difficulty, the shot of your wind bullet has been shortened to better match the PS1 original. But you might have noticed I said normal difficulty, as they have included easy and hard as well. With easy mode, they have the Wii's extra long wind shot. You can take twice the damage, and you have endless lives. Normal, again, is trying to better match the PS1 original, even if there are some of the Wii tweaks here and there. It's super solid, and once you beat that, you can unlock the hard mode, which you can get knocked out in a single hit. So even those players who have mastered the game to the point where they can nab every villager and every dreamstone without breaking a sweat, you have a brand new way to punish yourself. I honestly feel like the additions of the difficulty levels are a simple but perfect way to introduce this game to someone who has either never played the game before, or to somebody who has played the PS1 and Wii version before. They did make us wait 14 years to play the same game that we had already played before that point. This ultimately might feel a little bare bones, but after dealing with Sonic's last two game re-releases, I'm glad that they focused up on what mattered, the core gameplay experience, and if that came at the cost of needless extras, then so be it. But that said, there is one feature I can't quite wrap my head around, and that's this horrible filter, which I guess is supposed to be a callback to the old PS1 graphics, but it just ends up making it harder to play as the colors just merge together. It's absolutely atrocious. I really wish they would have just made the original PS1 game an unlockable extra, as I feel like that is still worth experiencing on its own. But hey, even without that, this is still a fantastic way for newcomers to first experience Klonoa. And for the love of God, I really hope you do buy it, because I really want this series to do better than it has. Even with a limited budget clearly on display for the re-release, it does feel like they're giving it their all here. This released as a full and complete experience. One that really doesn't shy too far away from that original 25 years ago. People dismissed it as quaint and antiquated back then, but ironically, that's why it's timeless. That's why you don't need to do a whole lot to the mechanics to make this stand out to a retro or brand new audience in 1998, 2008, or 2022. This game is always going to be good. And even if this is the last we see of Klonoa for another 15 years, and they come back re-releasing this game yet again, I will play it yet again. But for real, please go buy this. I don't want to wait another 15 years. And hey, it's not the only game you get in the Fantasy Reverie series, as there's another one we're gonna have to talk about very soon. So yeah, buckle in guys, because I'm going to be doing a lot of Klonoa, and I hope you're gonna join me on that ride, because I've been dying to talk about this series. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I can't tell you what it means to me to see other people finally talking about it, because they certainly weren't back when I was a kid. And as for, well, that story, don't you worry, we're gonna be breaking that down very soon. So if this is your first time with us here on the channel, be sure you subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. If you're being nice and you're just waiting for more Sonic, don't you worry, more Sonics down the pipeline. But thank you so much for giving this a shot. I do need a breather every now and then, and man, I'm so excited to talk more about this weird, stupid Cabot. But hey, enough rambling for now. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of the video. Huge thank you to the patrons who've been supporting me, and an extra special thank you to these fine folks here: Kyle Winter, Cirrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan Sonic 2 Blue, John, Josh Strider, Klonoa Monroe, Faizan Razul, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Ginger Bob, Nick S, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Dun Dun, Miles the Prower, Jeremy Singer, Mr. Boo J, World's Greatest Bard, Rain, Sam Webster, Dwight Graham, Fishflop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Shodan, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Missing No, Stefan Platonica, Reem Monic, Ty Cyan, Graham J. Hall, ChangeName.exe, Wayne is Boss, Lederick, David 20 Cove, Ryan Rolfs, The Lumberjack. Why do Swedish ships have barcodes on them? So they can Scandinavian. Hi, Mr. Poochie. NBTV, Mute, Trash Baphomet, Autumn from Twitter.com, SSG Infinite Sonic, That Pyramain, Mui Saxy, Jinsei Otome, Triplets Born, The Throne Awaits, Cunning Wise, Nezend, Enerjack 5, Grayson Coniger, Sherrod the Hedgehog, H.R. Hoffman, Spades the Nocturne, Ken K, Then 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sindarin 7, Stevie Cole, 3 Rule 4, Twilord, Asir Warrens of a Deadly Fate, Paisley, Eric Delgado, Cody Gracius, Tristan the Great, Kodinsky, Jamo Art, PK Durbar. Again, dude, you gotta tell me what that actually says. Wow. Yeah, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface here. I want to talk so much about Klonoa, so thank you guys for allowing me to do that. It always gets a little risky whenever I verge away from the hedgehog, so your support means a whole hell of a lot to me. But that's enough rambling from me. I'll see you guys next time. Toot toot, dream travelers.